I'm going to be using this, and it's sometimes called Hearty Soft, like that. And I always buy the deluxe, okay? I buy it from these people, from Artista Soft. But it's a non-edible, but it's an air drying modelling paste. Now, when you're doing something like this, and they're going to be freestanding away from the cake, look at that. They don't break. It's wonderful, isn't it? Look, they don't break. Now, anyone who's been in classes with me, we've done these for a few terms, different classes, and it's always a little bit heartbreaking when you lose half of them off one side. But look, with this, with the Artista Soft, I can still move it around. Now, these were made last night, just to give you an idea of how little time. Look, the seed just came off my fir cone. Just to show you how little time it takes. And then this is just florist tape and wire. So the florist tape I'm using is just a standard brown by Hamilworth. Let me show you the packet. There we are, Hamilworth floral tape. They don't say the colour on them, but this is just the standard brown rather than the twig. And the wires I'm using today, these are culprit ones as well, because I don't need fine ones today. There we go. So these are the culprit, and they are 20 gauge. I'll come up a little bit closer so you can see. There we go. So that's the 20 gauge wires and just the florist tape. Now, I have pre-coloured my paste, because obviously when you colour your paste, it gets a little bit warm, doesn't it? Right, so can you see just a very standard brown? So you can use any brand that you prefer. This was a Saracino brown, the gel colour. Now, when you're using the Artista Soft, make sure you keep it in a really good, strong Ziploc bag, okay? So what I'm going to do first of all, now, the only reason I coloured it last night was firstly because I made the pine cones last night, so it was easy to use. Oh, sorry, and that's the flour paste I generally use. I know this is a green packet, but just in case you wonder what flour paste I tend to use as well. But I have used lots of different flour pastes, and there's a lot of good ones out there. So I'm going to only loosely knead this today. Now, when you're rolling out Artista Soft, it does try to stick, but it doesn't stick to craft boards. And it comes with a really beautiful instruction sheet when you buy it from Artista Soft. Look at that, how wonderful is that? It's got its own glue. You're not allowed to stick it straight onto the cake. It's got to be separate from the cake. But you can place your flowers on a little piece of wafer paper. This is literally just Saracino brown. You can see how dark it is. Now, the reason I use the Saracino brown is because Artista Soft actually takes a lot of colour to colour it. So you want any professional colour. So you could use your Squire's Kitchen, you could use your Rainbow Dust, you can use Magic Colours, any of these lovely strong colours, Fractal Colors. The only thing I did do is accidentally leave my Fractal Colors brown at the school. That's the reason I've used my Saracino today. So I have got, and the reason I'm doing it this method first, I'm just going to show you a couple of little methods. This method is because a lot of people have got these daisy cutters. Now, these are Marguerite cutters by PME. It's only just over about 2.5 centimetres wide. And then that's the larger one. These are very old, these lovely cutters. So each little square on my board is 1 centimetre and the bold square is 5. Quick look at that picture for you. So that's how many pieces you need to cut out. So I'm going to show you 2 little methods. So I'm cutting out for 2. Okay, so that's going to be for 1, and then I'm just going to start cutting a couple, but I'm not going to cut too many because they will dry out. Now, so for the very first one, I'm going to just very gently cut off a few of these pieces. All right, and it doesn't matter how neatly you do them because the bottom is all going to be kind of mushed together. So, and then this piece I'm going to keep because I'm going to show you what I'll do with it. So I'm taking 1 20 gauge wire cut in half, and I'm going to get another one. Now, I use the Oasis scissors, but you can use your wire cutters. There we go. So you want to bend a flat hook into the end. So I've got my half width brown florist tape by Hamilworth. So I've got my 20 gauge wire with a hook bent in the end, stretch my half width tape, bind it up to the top of the hook, and then tape the whole thing in one now. So as I'm taping, I'm stretching and taping. Okay, let's do that again. So for those of you who may not have taped before, with florist tape, when you stretch it, it gets lighter in colour. And where the glue is not the front or the back, but it's in between the horizontal lines on the tape. So by stretching, you're activating or releasing that glue, whichever term works for you. So I always do it where I'm keeping my tape at a really tight angle. Let me move it against a lighter colour because it's brown. There we go. So can you see I'm doing this really slowly now, keeping it at a very light, tight angle. So even if you're only using half width tape, you get a quarter width finish. Make your life easier, isn't it? Absolutely. So that little piece that I broke off, I'm now going to fix without the use of glue, because Artista Soft can stick to itself without the use of glue. If you're using flower paste, you would need to glue this. Hang on, sticky hands. And you can use a little cornflower puff. I'm giving it a really good squeeze because it stuck to my hand initially. So this first piece, this is what we're going to use first of all. And what you initially want to do, I'm going to use just a regular bone tool and I'm going to flatten each section like that. So that was my bone tool. This is an FMM one, but you can use the PME, you can use metal bone tools. So I'm going to use the vein inside of my Dresden tool. So the wide end is the Dresden tool and the narrow side is the veining. And I'm just going to be patting from the center and out to the side. And I only need to pat with the Artista Soft because it's very, very soft. If you buy the deluxe, it's got more solidity to it. It's a lot more texture possible. There we are. And you notice I'm not actually putting any cornflower down on my pad, but bear in mind these are pine cones we're doing, these are not flower petals. Right, so you can see there you don't have to worry too much about shapes either. So this is a good simple way to get the center covered. So we're going to push that through. So I've got 4 here. I'm now going to put 2 opposite each other over. You don't have to push them in too tight. Can you see that's 2 opposite each other? And then I'm going to push the bottom one, but I'm only pushing from the bottom. And then I'm going to push the other one and it's a little bit bigger, so it'll stretch around a little bit further. So already I've got the cup-in shape because I had that little hook covered in some brown tape. I'll come ever so slightly up to the top because as with roses, with any flowers, I think the middles are the hardest part. So size-wise, as you can see, it's fitting in a 1 centimetre square, so it's not very big at all. Now, I'm still going to cut some pieces off, but this time I'm only going to cut off. So we'll do 4. Now, the reason I opted for 4, can you see the 2 there? I'm thinking I'm going to add 1 onto this side. So now it looks like my inner circle has got 3. And then I can pull these around a little bit, the same as you're doing a simple rose shape. They don't have to be attached to the base. That's why I'm not worried if they're attached or not. And then we're just going to pull them around and they're not too perfect. So can you see they start to come down now, but I need that inside to be more closed than this section. Can you see I'm not needing any glue because it's the Artista Soft. If you're using flower paste, you will need to use your glue. And if you're using cold porcelain or Artista Soft, you can actually use wood glue instead, but I try to just use the glue that comes naturally with the paste. There we go. So what we're going to do now, we are going to very quickly do one inner for another side type, just so that I can show you how to do it. And with this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's right, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to take it so that there's 5 in there. So I'm going to show you a slightly different method. Now, if you've removed 5 of this rather scruffy shape, you need to spread them out. Can you see now it looks like a star, covering that other middle that I made? So make sure it's completely sealed in, because the Artista Soft will stick to itself beautifully, but is not that keen on sticking to something else. So there we go, pull off the excess. So I just need something on there for this piece to stick onto. So that was the spare pieces that came off that shape. So now I'm going back exactly the same as before. Right, so this one now, I'm going to be using 2 pushed opposite. So this is what I call the rose method. Then you'll pull 2 opposite each other, and then you'll wrap 3 around, and you're keeping the bases separate. And unlike roses, you're allowed to see the very middle of this, because it adds to the effect. It's like a seed in the center. There we go. So that's another method. So you can do 5 all at once. And then you'll put a second row on that one, tapping down, add in the texture. Right, so let's pop that in. And this one now, we are literally going to slide up. And before we've pulled it all the way, I'm going to give it a squeeze in both directions. Give it a turn, give it a squeeze again, and then slide them up. And what that does is it adds a little neck on the back of your flower. And that neck on the back of your flower pulls this second row down a bit. So you can see the second row has now come down and the top row is higher. Okay, you can wiggle it around if you want it a bit closer. There we go. Right, so let's move into these larger ones. Now, with this one here, this is the method I'm doing now. Okay, this is done completely using the daisy cutter shape. This one was done where the middle has been done for you already. So that was method 2 for the middle. And every single individual piece has been added separately. Okay. So let me show you back to the cutter one. So now we're going to use this, and we only actually want to use 5. I'm counting very carefully because sometimes I forget. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Because your brain wants to remove that other one. It wants to get it down to 4. So make sure you're counting so you don't get confused. There we go. Pop that one in. So I've now spread them out. So this is the second size of my cutter shapes. Bit of a lump on the back, can you see, but not much. Excuse the rustling. Just going to get a little bit more paste. So what I'm going to do, I am going to put an extra piece slid up behind, and we're talking very small. So slide up another piece of the Artista Soft, no glue required. Pop it loosely onto the back, very loosely. Slide this next one in. And I use my 2 fingers and a thumb like a little pedestal for the wire to go through, which supports the shape that you're doing. Right, there we go. So let's hold it very still. So if I hold it from the side, can you see that little lump of paste in there? So that is going to help you have something to pinch this next row onto, because what you're doing, you're pushing in and pulling down, and the pulling down action is what helps to cup that next row even further. Can you see it's already come in now, hasn't it? But it's also left the lump for the next one. There we go. I am going to roll really tiny little balls of paste. So we are thinking a petit pois pea cut in half, or if you've got 1 centimetre circle, you'd have to cut it into quarters. Okay, and I want 5. Now this may look very strange, but I played with it and I really enjoyed making the method. It worked really nicely. So I'm going to press down on the round end. Press down, press down. There we go. So can you see we've got little paddles, haven't we? Lots of little paddles. So I'm now going to make sure I'm pressing down on the pointed bit, because that pointed bit is just going to be our fixing. All right, and I'm going to push off to one side with my texture, drag it a little bit. Want lots of texture in this, because this is the inside and that texture is strong enough to show through to the outside. So you can make sure they're still slightly cupped at the bottom. Give them a little pinch. It's how you make guinea pig ears. An ear. A ear for a guinea pig. That's how I say my ears. An ear for a guinea pig. That's how I make those. Lovely little fan shaped. I'm going to hold it up to the camera. Bear with me 2 seconds. Very slowly moving up. There we are. Can you see the texture on them? Can you also see the texture on the first one that we did? And you can keep pulling them up with the Artista Soft. You can move them around quite a long time. This is the second version. This is what we're adding these to now. Now, I think we actually might only be adding 3 on this particular run because he's still quite small. You could add another row of the other method I did, but all you're doing is you're pressing that section against the wire. Now, when I looked at fir cones, they don't seem to be set rows. They seem to be an ever-increasing circle. So you just keep adding them around and around as you go. And you just get lower and they come out a little bit for each row as well. So I'm just pressing them on. So can you see if I look from above now? Now these ones will move backwards. You don't want to glue them in, you want to have the movement, but every now and again you can cup them back in. Can you see the lovely scoop shape of your Dresden tool? And to keep the shape going, this one wants to flop, so I'm going to bend it to one side and leave it sit there so that it can hold its shape. I'm going to do a couple more, or 3 more actually, because I've got 2 spares, so let's do 3 more. So these now get pushed on as well. So now we're going to do a row of 5. There we are. So I'm going to pop down onto the bottom, press in against the side of the stem, and all you're doing is an ever so slight overlap. Okay, so the only bit that's pressing against the stem is that little spiky handle at the bottom. So this is instead of adding the padding that we added onto the other one. And make sure that you line it underneath and it's got room to breathe, so to speak. And it doesn't have to be like a rose, it doesn't have to be that perfect number going around. Right, can you see that starting to come quite nicely now? Make sure you cup it up a little bit. So that one, let me hold this against my hand again, is this one. it's the individually added method. Now what happens is you leave them hang for a little minute and then you can cup them a little bit more. Can you see I can keep pulling it? And you're not losing that cupped shape because you're letting them cool down a little bit first. Whoops. Right, so let's pop some of these on. Now I want to put a row of 5 again. On. I don't need to add a piece underneath this time because do you remember we had the neck already in place? So now I have to make sure I'm in camera angle, squish it gently at the base to help them cup, and that's what gets that the method. There we are. Actually, while the others are dry, let's add those 2 very quickly, and we're going to use this one in my hands as a baby one because I want to show you how to dust one as well. It's coming along quite nicely now. There we go. Now, when I do them for wedding cakes, as you can see in this image, I keep them quite pale depending on the wishes of the customer. So when they're up in the tree still, they can be quite bright and quite pretty, but when they're actually on the floor, they can be darker. But I have to admit, I like it when you find a stem on the floor and you get these lovely rich colours, because it's the rich colours for me that add the depth to those sprays. You can imagine that with the lovely greens. Do you know what I mean? Those rich colours really come into play. But you could choose to keep them nice and pale, so we'll talk about that when we're colouring in a second. And if they stick together, you can snip them apart with the little scissors as well. Right, so now we're going to add this one. So let's have a little look. Always make sure you've got a neck there to start, which we do, so that's great. So we're going to come down a little bit. We're going to hold it to about 1/2 centimetre away from the other one, and then we squeeze. Now, because this one's slightly bigger, I'm going to come down further again. And if you can't get it to squeeze, hold your Dresden tool, the veining tool, in and then squeeze it. And it doesn't matter in this case if they overlap, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'm just holding the Dresden tool in, the veining tool, to keep them further away from the next row. So if you go too high, don't panic, you can pull it back too low. So this means if you've really stretched a set of petals, you can use the lovely shape that you've got, but you're not hiding the row previous. Otherwise it'll just be like making catkins or pussy willow. I've got a willow tree at the top of the garden, and I'm always itching to make some pussy willow whenever it flowers. Right, so can you see that layer now? That's got 8 on it. So that is what I call the fast method. So here's a fast method one. Can you see how much busier it is? There are different types of fir cones as well. So this one is using 8 all the way along, okay? All right, I'm just making sure that's done right. And now that needs to rest sideways like that. Let's pop that there. And we can pop this one on as the last one, and then we're going to start dusting and assembling. So we only need glue, itself is the glue. It only needs glue if you've got a dry piece that you're adding to. So if I made this yesterday and I wanted to add to it, I would now need the glue. And I use the high-tack Impex glue that you can get from our craft shops. But it's a wood glue. That's the glue that you would use. So if you want to make sure that there's a gap correctly, you can drop a ball into the center and press. Can you see? Very, very small, as if you're making a daisy, and then push the wire through. And then when that goes in, that gives you the gap straight away. But I'm still squeezing, okay? Because the squeezing is what gives you the cup shapes. Look at that. They're so cute, aren't they? I absolutely adore them. Now, I'm going to stop here because this is just going to be a baby one, okay? Because this one is going to be paired up with this one on a stem to show you how they grow together. You keep going with this one until it is the length that you need, all right? And you just add the individual pieces. Can you see from underneath? They're about the size of a small pea in the end. I'm going to put my thumb underneath it so you can see the size. I'm going to move very slowly. There we go. Can you see the texture? That's literally from the veining tool. I'm going to move it slightly. There we are. You can see the lines coming through, can't you? And that is the individually added pieces. But that one took about an hour, an hour just to make the individual pieces and add them. So this method with the daisy cutter is very comparable and is very quick. You see there is a difference, but not much, not enough to worry about, is it? You could combine the two methods as well. So you could combine using the individuals with the daisy center. So you could get to this stage and then add large pieces to it. But we're going to stop because this one's going to pair with this one on the same branch. Before we grab the colours, I will mention the twiggy bits that I've made in advance. So these are really beautifully easy to make. If you can see, they are just tape, just florist tape. So there's two types. So this first type, the very basic type, is stretching your florist tape and what we call twisting it back on itself until it eventually catches into a spike. Get the spike about 5 centimeters long and then fold the spike in half, okay, and then twist. So you're now taping the first spike that you made as if it was a piece of wire. Break off the tape and then twist to the bottom, which gives you a spike. Okay, so I just made a selection of those. I will do that once more. So you give it a quick twist when you've stretched your tape, get a 5 centimeter long twist, fold it in half and stretch. So now you're taping this original twist that you've made as if it's a piece of florist tape, a piece of wire. So can you see I've doubled back over itself? Break it off when you know you want it to end and twist again. So it's basically just double thick twists. The other twist that I made was the actual buds, and they're nice and easy as well. So you make the twist as before, but this time you make it slightly longer, maybe about 9 or 10 centimeters. And if you can see why my fingers can't twist it anymore, it's because it's got sticky. So can you see it's a little bit longer, 9 centimeters. And then I'm going to tangle up half of it. So it's all tangled up. I've bunched it up. Now I'm stretching my tape and I'm taping over that lump. And that lump will become a bud. They're leaf buds. There we go. So it's just making leaf buds. Like that. So it's just the twisted wire and you tangle the twist up like that and then tape over the tangle, okay? So I'm going to dust this little pale one. Now I would normally leave it maybe an hour or two to dust these, just to let them cool down a little bit. I always use a photographer's lens cleaner to blow away the excess dust. There are some that come off the floor that are quite chestnut looking, and there are others that come off the floor that are paler. Now these are the ones generally with the seeds still attached because they're newer, they're fresher, and they haven't had the richness of colour, but I love the richness of colour. So we're going to mix a little bit of the milk chocolate in with the dark chocolate, blend those two but not perfectly, tap off the excess. Now again, I mentioned you'd leave this for about an hour or maybe two, depends on the temperature. Tuck it right inside and then just brush up, but not all the way to the ends. And you go in amongst all the rows. Now this is why I also prefer to work with Artista Soft or cold porcelain, because I'm not going to damage it by pulling apart these pieces. If you're using quick drying flour pastes, and I adore Squire's Kitchen because it is a quick drying flour paste, but it's not something I use for my fir cones particularly. So I'm just going inside every single row, and that's why I'm using the filbert brush, because it's a flat brush with a roundish tip, and that roundish tip is almost the same shape as these little petal sections. There we are, just tucking them underneath each one. So this is milk chocolate and dark chocolate mixed together, but not mixed thoroughly. Leave them slightly separated because you'll get those separate colours coming through as well. And I'm going all the way to the top, tucking them in, and I'm basically touching the base of each of the leaf sections and not coming to the top. And by doing that, I give myself a lovely variety of colours going on. If I hold that up, can you see the instant colour difference that you get with that? It's nothing, is it? It's no work whatsoever. Now these have also got a bit of black on there, but every now and again with the base ones, I noticed they got a bit dirtier on the edges. So I'm painting a stripe on each individual large section. If it's small, leave the fair points, leave the delicate points. And I'm going in with this mixed colour, and then at the very base go in with the dark chocolate, completely dark chocolate. Every now and again there was some black, but not everywhere, and it's random places. It's almost where they've started to decay a little bit. So you could go in between, really nice and in the centres, makes the depth come nicely. Just tucking those in there. There we go. The white is for right at the end, by the way, in case you're wondering. Every now and again, and if you feel a bit looks too blank, that's where you pop the black. Look at the difference already. They're lovely. And if like that one, can you see that one's curled a bit too much? Pull it back out and then cup it with your fingers again. Can you see? A little bit of green. Now, sometimes where the tree doesn't get as much light, bits of moss will grow and the tree will green up slightly. So every now and again, I pop some green and then I go over it ever so slightly. Don't leave the green on there untouched. You just about see a tiny bit of green peeking through. Hopefully the camera's picking that up for you. Right, now, so we need to spray that one. So I've got the PME spray glaze. You can also steam them as well. So I'm going to take the full length of the wire, starting from the top, and I'm holding it nicely and tightly in and going right to the bottom. Doesn't matter if it's completely covered. And then I'm going to pick a bud. Usually the smallest bud can go on the top. So now I'm going to go back in with my florist tape. I'm going to go up to the top, And now this is breaking all of your taping rules. You're allowed to be messy. So I'm stretching my tape and I'm binding the tape and coming down a bit, binding it again and coming around, because what you want is texture on that tape. You don't want that tape to be perfectly smooth. You want that lovely texture. Then you can add in a bud. Tape that in, and at the edge of every bud there's a knuckle, so wrap it around twice. Can you see it makes the tape thin? You want that thinness because it's like a binding. Then come down a bit, keep stretching, keep wrapping and keep binding. So can you see already this is giving us twig texture? It's not straight, it's not smooth, it's just lovely and knobbly, nicely textured. So you're going to come down a bit. Now it's going to be thicker here, so I'm going to add more tape in. You can add more wires in as well. So I'm going to add more tape onto this section, do some binding, wrapping, stretching all the time, binding and wrapping, and you can go up and down so that texturous stem is now developing. And I want them to bend, so wherever a bud comes out, I think we're going to go with 2 at the top actually, yeah, wherever a bud comes out the stem would bend. So I've wrapped it around twice to create the knuckle, add those around, and I'm now going to go down to the bottom again. This is just little ways of thickening up that stem bit by bit. You can use these twigs in your arrangement on their own. You don't need anything else because I think they're that pretty, you know. Really lovely twigs. And you can do them in a beige and you can add your dust colours to it as well. There's a way of making pussy willow as well, which I teach in another class, and that's really easy to do. Now this stem, can you see, is a little bit thin. That's the one we've just made. Can you see I can already lie it down and it's not destroying my plant? I can pull it around, I can shape it, and it's not going to fall off the wire. But what I always do is I tape up and I catch that bottom bit of the Artista Soft paste and I tape over it. So if I've got to use something straight away, I've got to make sure that paste is going to stay on that wire. And I am using it straight away, obviously. There we go. So tape down, and all I'm doing is I'm thickening, and I'm going to pull about 1 centimetre angle away there and about 1 centimetre angle away there. So I'm going to pop in, or the little one can go above actually. That looks quite attractive. Yeah, little one can go slightly above. And then these 2 are going to sit as a pair. Bind it 3 times to make quite a large knuckle before you add it in. Now normally, as I said, you could wait a little bit longer for that one to dry. And then you're grabbing all your little pieces of twiddled tape that we made. And I tend to put in 2 or 3 at once. I don't put every individual one at once with a wrap of tape, otherwise the tape ends up so thick. So I'm adding them in bundles. Maybe get away with 4 in there. Wrapping the tape around. Hopefully you can see the spiky bits sticking out because of the angle of the wire. To use your flower stems and keep them round, you use 1, 3 and 5 wires and so on. Never use even numbers of wires because otherwise you end up with a square stem. So make sure you add your wires in uneven numbers, odd numbers, and they will look more natural. You'll get a rounder stem. So make this stem nice and twisted. And I'm still going to add in a couple of bits further down as well. There. I love texture. I think texture is what really makes all of our pieces look better, isn't it? Get that extra texture on there and it just looks so lovely. There, look at that, the amount of texture on that stem. Apart from, well, we've made that entire thing but with 1 fir cone today, haven't we? So it just shows how quick it goes together. And I've broken the rules. I've got 3 stems, but I've got 4 fir cones. And the best thing to do to absolutely finish them is to get that tiny hint of white, and every now and again you catch, and what this does, it brings the lightness up onto the fir cone. Not everywhere, and they're allowed to look dusty, and this sounds disgusting, but it's actually where the plant starts decaying on the stem. But you can imagine you could do that in winter as well. But the white is literally the decay, where they've sat on the forest floor, because the branches fall down as well. The trees shed the little loose branches, or they get blown off in the wind. There we go. So let's get that last bit in there. I'm going to put a bit of green coming up on the stem every now and again, because it'll look that much better. And how refreshing is it not to have a perfect smooth stem every now and again, because we're so used to having to do perfect, aren't we? So I'm just going to hold this up to the light. Can you see the little white bits every now and again? You do need to get the excess off with photographer's lens cleaner, but you'll still get little pieces of white appearing like that. So this is the one we made from start to finish today, and they are the 3 varieties that I made yesterday. So this one is with the individually added. This one is where you add it in 4 first, then in 3, then in 5s until the bottom. And this one you added in 8s all the way from top to bottom. So it's just to give you options. Actually, I'll hold it against the white because you can see it really well. It's just to give you options, because I think when we've got options, we produce our best work, don't we? There we go. So there are the fir cones.